Thank you very much, Dr. Murthy, for the introduction. So I'm going to will be speaking about explainability and interpretability in medical AI. Medical AI is what I technically specialize in. Given that this session is recorded, I would want to make it clear that the opinions over here in this presentation are my own because of the nature of the business we work in. So currently, AI is kind of becoming center in all walks of life, and medical is kind of catching up. So to give you a brief about my presentation, I'll be talking about where is AI in medical devices and FDA, the state of AI explainability and interpretability in medical devices and in medical AI. The third part where we'll be touching on is like, do models or this AI systems have to be explainable? And last thing we'll be looking into is the data-centric approach. So to give you a lay of the land, I think from a previous speaker, we have in the United States, 3 classification of devices. There's class 1, class 2, and class 3. And FDA categorizes them based on the risk level. So class 1 medical device is generally a low risk general control. For example, like gloves and stuff like that. For class 2, they are medium risk, maybe like surgical tools. And class 3 are life supporting devices, maybe a pacemaker, for example. And when we have this AI enabled medical devices, they mostly belong to class 1 or class 2. And vast majority of them actually belong to class 1, and they kind of help radiologists, pathologists, or surgeons kind of make more informed decisions. So they are more assistive in nature. And a lot of them actually go through a de novo classification in the past, which means like they're, and when you go for an FDA application or submission, if there is a product that's already in the market, you can basically use that as a basis for your own product. But a lot of this novel AI enabled medical devices that are entering the market, they have a de novo classification. They are kind of working on unique problems, and they are helping augment the capabilities of healthcare workers. So it's pretty exciting time to be in medical devices, and especially enabling them with AI. AI is largely labeled as a software as medical device. So FDA has a guidelines, and just 2 days back, they also opened up like a draft for continuous deployment on medical devices. As we know, like AI, as data grows, ML teams want to kind of work on the new data that has been collected, and they want to continuously develop the models. But FDA did not have a very decisive, draft in terms of like how it kind of affects the product. So that's kind of great, that momentum that FDA is showing. And FDA broadly classifies the AI algorithms as continuous learning and a fixed algorithm. So continuous learning means like the internal model, the weights of the models would change based on, it would adapt to local conditions, while a fixed algorithm is where you give a fixed input at any point of time, and if you release that specific model through the clearance, you will get a specific output. So in the United States since 2018, I think this is a large number of AI-enabled technologies have come in radiology. We have like 391 devices that use AI, and it's around 514 devices that we have in the market that have a de novo classifications that are AI enabled, and large majority of them are in radiology because has largely to do with data and less to do with other technologies. I guess in medicine and medical AI, because of HIPAA compliance and other data protection policies, it's difficult to get large-scale data as compared to what we have in general machine learning community, like the COCO, the ImageNet. And so this AI companies kind of struggle with getting the latest data on specific use cases, but they are increasing. So how does like the AI teams in healthcare kind of operate? Well, we have this ML lifecycle, which starts from like collecting data, processing the data, to training AI models, deploying them, monitoring them, and then completing the cycle. We do have additional steps that we have to take in order to comply with FDA, which is like you can go with clinical trials. There is, once your model are out there in the field, you can have corrective and preventive action, and how do you respond to those things. Also, you need to maintain a quality system, like quality management system, in order to see like how much your AI model is drifting and how it impacts the predictions. So to the main topic of AI explainability and interpretability, given that somebody's life is at stake and patients have the right to kind of ask, like if certain procedures, if they are undergoing a certain procedure, how it impacts them. And so a lot of people in medical AI, the healthcare workers, want to have that capability of understanding the decisions made by this AI model. So if it's looking for like metastatic breast cancer in this case, hey, can you, what we want is like specifically like this whole slide images, which are like gigapixel images. Can you basically look at like certain liaisons within the image, and then I can basically make an informed decision based out of it. So explain it, like medical is a very unique application where explainability can be mandated and can really help augment the capabilities of pathologists, radiologists are involved. So let's go into the definition of explainability and interpretability. And these are like quite interchangeably used. But when we say like interpretability, we are largely talking about if I give any AI model an input and I get an output out of it, can I interpret based on the data that I fed it, that I understand how this model is working. And people in medicine are quite experts who have been in working in a specific domain. And based on like certain input parameters, it's kind of, they would be able to tell like, hey, this is the course of action that has to be done. And if there is like a disagreement, they would know, hey, I think based on this parameters, my experience tells me like, there's something wrong with the model. So the interpretability is like, can I make sense out of the output given an input? Explainability is more of an engineering tool. It basically tells you about the inner working of the model. That is like when you feed a data to the model, how does the model kind of churn that data and kind of make some meaningful sense out of it that you can basically individually diagnose. So the flow is essentially you get the prediction of the AI model, you get some explanation, and you show it in case to a medical expert, or your engineering team can be a benefactor of it. So let's talk about the accuracy and interpretability trade-off. As your models become more and more complex, much like the neural networks, for example, are considered as black box networks because they were considered kind of difficult to interpret. But there are certain models which are quite easy. For example, linear regression models. So as you increase the complexity of the models, it becomes more difficult to interpret them. But at the same time, more complex models are able to work with high dimensional data. And so if you're working with MRI images, for example, it's very difficult for maybe a linear regression model to kind of fit for various disease, like cancer types, for example. But a neural network is, a 3D neural network is kind of built for it. But of course, when you go for a more complex model, there is a loss of interpretability. So it goes from like classification, linear network, and deep learning networks. And now with the advent of transformers, they are getting more and more complex, and we are having like millions of parameters now. So let's talk about the types of explainability. We have a largely like 4 types of explainability. We have the model-based one, which depends, like, do you use a linear regression model? Are you using a deep learning neural network-based model? And this is when the engineering team kind of decides firsthand that for this particular application, I'm going to use, for example, linear regression. Post hoc, which is most common in the submissions that we have seen with FDA, is that you have a model that is trained, and then you do a post analysis of it. So the model has been trained, and you kind of give it an input, and then perturb certain things within the input, or look within like certain clues within the model to kind of get a post hoc explanation. There are model specific, so they can be for decision trees, or there are certain explanations that are model agnostic. So it doesn't matter like if you give them a decision tree or a neural network, they will, based on the output, kind of try to interpret the intermediate results. So in medical AI, the most common ones that we see are based on CAM and grad CAM. So they basically look into like the individual layers and then see like, hey, on the activation maps, and say, well, based on like when I give it an input image, I look at the activation map, and based on the activation map, I see like, here, there are like certain liaisons in the image. And that has been since 2000 till 2018, like the most common method. There has been new methods that we have seen with TCAF, LIME, and SHAP, which I will briefly explain about. So local interpretable model agnostic explanation will look at like specific regions that are like locally faithful for a particular class, regardless of the model. So over here is an example which we see is like, for example, if you have a hospital that wants to detect beds, but they want to be privacy preserving at the same time. So, well, this is a place where the hospitals have a concern, and maybe they want to monitor how many beds come in, come out. So they have a legitimate concern. So we can use LIME in this case to kind of just look like, hey, we have a trained model that kind of detects beds, but it also looks at like specific regions within the image that it makes it classify, and it's not looking at like people. And then that way, you can gain the trust of the hospitals. This can be very specific to the use case. Second is the Shapley additive explanation, which is based on game theory, where you give an image and say is like, okay, give me some like strong activation maps and tell me which features are more important and which features are not. The third one, which came out of Google and has been it's kind of quite popular nowadays, is testing with concept activation features, which takes a different approach. So what we saw previously is like, we are looking at features within the neural network or certain attributes, but in medicine, people are more interested in the concepts essentially. So can we get like an explanation that is more conceptual based, because that makes it much more much more interpretable rather than explainable. And so when you show that, okay, based on the certain features, I feel based on certain features like, for example, the object, the color, the texture, this is the reason why this model is making a certain prediction that kind of helps them point the user towards the data rather than towards the model. So this is one of the great papers where you have an AI model that is working with a technical expert in skin cancer detection. This was published in Nature, this paper named Human-Computer Collaboration for Skin Cancer Recognition, where they did multiple experiments where they had just the pathologists just look at make a prediction on their own without any AI assistance, with AI assistance, and they would try to contradict the opinion when they would do like by themselves and stuff like that. So what this paper kind of found an interesting conclusion was that if you AI can help improve the predictions of less experienced clinicians. So they can be very assistive in that nature. However, if the prediction, like if it would help them develop a certain baseline level of trust, but however, if they develop too much trust, what happens is if the AI model fails, then they also kind of go line in line with what the AI prediction is saying, because they kind of over with their experience with the AI model, they kind of develop that trust on the model that's saying that, okay, my predictions and the AI model's predictions almost most of the time were correct. And now when I go back, and if I see like a contradiction between the AI model and my own prediction, I feel the AI is working better. And if you give an explanation or you have been providing it an explanation, then we humans, being the ultimate black box, also tend to trust the AI because explanation doesn't has to be reasonable, right? Or it doesn't has to be correct. Like just providing an explanation is not enough. You have to give a correct explanation or correct interpretable result. So you develop that baseline trust with the user. Over here, the AI developed a baseline trust with the user, but it gave it a wrong prediction, and that just led the user astray. So this leads to an important conclusion, like, or gives a good thought process is, do these algorithms have to be interpretable? And we humans are the ultimate black box. A lot of decisions we human based, and even the people in the medical industry, we work on things that are more evidence based. Almost like 400 drugs. I don't remember the correct figure, but a lot of our practices are evidence based, and we do not necessarily look for explanation of why they are working. Yes, if they have an explanation or if they are, it's great, but it's a lot of things are evidence based. And uh, speaking with like clinicians, they do not care like if you use a regression model or a deep learning network. They do not concern with the model, but they are more concerned with the output. They're more concerned with the input, the data that you used. So that begs the question, like, is interpretability or explainability important? Well, it can help to with a couple of things. And one of the major ways where it can help both the engineering teams as well as the medical community in general is like looking into certain biases, because these models are trained on data, and we have sampling biases all the time. We have unequal access to healthcare. There is treatment gaps. There is biases in decision making. There is practices that were different. There is real world bias that basically creeps into your data. And then medical community also looks into historic data and then makes future prediction based on the historic past. So we have so much biases that are present, and maybe explainable AI can be a great tool in order to unearth this data biases that are used in training these models rather than targeting the models themselves. So what I propose is this, that engineering teams and even taking your stakeholders, the medical community, is to work on a data-centric AI approach, which means that the data lies at the very heart of your medical AI device that you're building. And the quality of your predictions necessarily depends on the quality of your data. And this also helps mitigate a lot of important concepts in statistics, which, like, for example, data drift. And the best example I can give you is COVID. Like during COVID, or whenever there are major epidemics, there is a change in the distribution of detections of certain illnesses. And we would want to monitor those things. And when you have these models, this AI-enabled devices out in the market, and you do not change them and stuff like that, these models will fail, or they'll give you wrong predictions. So essentially, in medical AI, the data lies at the very center. And this is something even the surgeons, everyone is more concerned about. Like, hey, what model was it trained on? What data was it trained on? How legitimate is that? How well vetted the data is before you train it? And engineering teams tend to focus more on, sometimes on the model-centric approach. So you use more complex models to solve the same, situation. But if you have garbage in, like in deep learning, they say it's like garbage in, garbage out. If your model doesn't, if your data is not clean, or it doesn't is not clean, and then you try to just target against, like, the solution that kind of presents to you is like, okay, I'm going to work or make more and more complex models, but that doesn't help. Like just using simple models, maybe sometimes even classical techniques can work quite well on a very clean data set, rather than complicating the models and trying to make it much less interpretable and uh, going away from that data-centric explainative approach. And when you go data-centric or have this data-centric approach in AI, if, as most of them, medical folks are not particularly interested in, like, if you used a ResNet model or a VGG16 model or what your backbone was, but then if you tell them, hey, this is the data that we worked on, and well, you can do some sort of a post hoc analysis and say, this is what we are looking at, that can help develop that trust so that more people from the medical community start using AI. But at the same time, they need to keep their suspicion high, and they also kind of know the certain pitfalls that helps in that exist in this AI models. So I propose that AI or explainable AI is a great engineering tool, which kind of will help us unearth like things like data biases, and so that we can concentrate on like maybe certain group population that does not have access to healthcare, or certain diseases that are quite kind of rare, which lead us to like much more imbalanced data sets. We can look into like external conditions that affect the AI models. And for example, COVID was a great example. Knowing the pitfalls of our AI model, that, hey, this AI model is trained on this particular data set and it does not have this like certain attributes that you're looking for. So having that knowledge limit and being upfront with the stakeholder. So it can help, explainable AI can help understand and mitigate model failures. So to summarize, interpretability is essential to develop baseline trust, but we would want the end users to kind of default to their clinical judgment if the AI model makes mistake. And that's why maybe giving them an interpretation or explanation all the time might not be useful. And it serves as a great insight in terms of looking into your data and the biases that the data has. And the data-centric approach is indeed the most interpretable way, where everybody, all the stakeholders kind of understand what's going on with the models. With that, thank you very much. I'm open to questions.